At 5:17 in the morning, Daniel Hayes stepped out of his car and froze. A 17-year-old boy was sleeping against the wall outside his office. Daniel had seen him there for 3 mornings. But today, something was different. Beside the boy lay an old brown envelope. Daniel picked it up. His own name was written across the front. Before he could open it, the boy suddenly woke up, grabbed his wrist, and whispered, "Please, my father told me you were the only person who could open that." Daniel stared at him. "Who is your father?" The boy hesitated. "Samuel Carter." Daniel's expression changed instantly. He hadn't heard that name in nearly 20 years. Samuel was the employee Daniel had fired after accusing him of stealing from his company. And as Daniel looked at the exhausted boy sleeping on his doorstep, one terrifying thought crossed his mind. What if Samuel had been telling the truth all along? 6 weeks earlier, Noah Carter was living a life that was difficult but still manageable. He was 17 and lived with his father, Samuel, in a small, aging apartment on the edge of the city. They didn't have much, but Noah had never considered his father poor in the way other people did. Samuel always found a way to put food on the table. For years, he worked wherever he could, repairing broken equipment, cleaning buildings, and taking temporary maintenance jobs. He taught Noah that having little money was never an excuse to lose your dignity. Then Samuel became sick. Within weeks, the man who had spent his entire life taking care of Noah could barely get out of bed. Noah started working after school to help with medicine and groceries. Some evenings, he came home exhausted, but he never complained. One rainy night, Noah sat beside his father's bed as Samuel struggled to breathe. Samuel reached beneath his pillow and pulled out an old brown envelope. "Noah," he whispered, placing it in his son's hands, "when I'm gone, there's something you need to do." Noah immediately shook his head. "Dad, don't talk like that. Listen to me." Samuel looked directly into his son's eyes. "Take this to Daniel Hayes." Noah frowned. Who was Daniel Hayes? For several seconds, Samuel said nothing. Then he quietly answered, "The owner of the company where I used to work." Noah looked at the envelope. "What's inside? You'll know when the time comes." That was all Samuel would say. 3 days later, Samuel died. And Noah was left with nothing but a small apartment, unpaid bills, and the envelope his father had forbidden him to open. He searched for Daniel Hayes online. What he found surprised him. Daniel wasn't just a businessman. He was now the wealthy owner of one of the largest construction companies in the city. The next morning, Noah put the envelope inside his jacket and took a bus across town. He had no idea that walking through those glass doors would uncover a truth his father had carried for nearly 20 years. Noah reached Daniel Hayes's office just after 9 in the morning. The building was nothing like the neighborhood where he lived. Glass walls, polished floors, expensive suits, and people moving quickly from one meeting to another. Noah stood near the entrance, nervous but determined. He walked to the reception desk. "I need to see Daniel Hayes." The receptionist looked him over. "Do you have an appointment?" "No." "Then I'm afraid you can't see him." Noah reached into his jacket and touched the envelope. "It's about my father." The receptionist asked, "What's your father's name?" "Samuel Carter." Her expression didn't change. She simply shook her head. "I'm sorry, Mr. Hayes is in a meeting." Noah stepped aside. He waited. 1 hour passed. Then 2. Eventually, a security guard approached him. "You've been here long enough. You need to leave." Noah looked toward the elevator. "I just need 5 minutes with Mr. Hayes." "You heard me." The guard escorted him outside. Noah didn't argue. He sat across the street and waited. That evening, Daniel finally noticed him from the back seat of his car. "Who's that boy?" Daniel asked his driver. "I've seen him here before," the driver replied. Security says he keeps coming back. Daniel looked through the window. Noah was sitting alone, holding the same brown envelope against his chest. For a moment, Daniel felt a strange sense of familiarity. Then he looked away. The next morning, Noah returned. And the morning after that. Every day, the same thing happened. He waited. Security sent him away. And he came back the next morning. Until, on the fourth day, Daniel finally walked out of his office and stopped in front of him. "You've been waiting for me," Daniel said. Noah stood. "Yes, sir." "Why?" Noah slowly pulled the brown envelope from his jacket. "My father told me to give this to you." Daniel looked at the name written across the front. Daniel Hayes. His face became serious. "What was your father's name?" Noah answered quietly. "Samuel Carter." For the first time, Daniel didn't look at Noah like a stranger. He looked at him like someone who had just brought the past back to his doorstep. Daniel stared at the envelope for several seconds. "Where did you get this?" "My father gave it to me before he died." Daniel looked away. He hadn't heard Samuel Carter's name in nearly 20 years. Back then, Daniel's company was still small. Samuel had worked there as a maintenance employee, quiet, reliable, and trusted with access to several parts of the building. Then one morning, money disappeared from the company's accounts. The amount was large enough to put the struggling company in serious danger. An internal investigation pointed toward Samuel. The evidence appeared convincing. Daniel confronted him. Samuel insisted he was innocent. But Daniel was under pressure from investors and believed the records in front of him. He fired Samuel. Samuel left that office carrying his belongings in a cardboard box. Daniel never saw him again. Until now. "Did my father ever tell you what happened?" Noah asked. Daniel swallowed. "He said he was innocent." "He said more than that," Noah replied. Daniel looked at the envelope. "What?" Noah's voice became quieter. "My father said you were the man who could finally prove it." Daniel's expression hardened. "Open the envelope." Noah shook his head. "He told me not to." "Why?" "He said you had to open it yourself." Daniel hesitated before taking it. His hands were suddenly unsteady. Inside was an old company document, several handwritten notes, and a small storage receipt dated 19 years earlier. Daniel read the first page. His face changed. The document showed that the money supposedly stolen by Samuel had actually been transferred from the company's account before Samuel's name appeared on the transaction records. Daniel read it again. Then again. Someone had altered the records. Someone had made Samuel look guilty. Daniel looked at Noah. "Where did your father get this?" "He kept it hidden all these years." Daniel sat down. For the first time in 20 years, he wondered whether the man he had fired had been telling the truth. But there was one problem. The evidence wasn't enough. Daniel needed to know what happened to the original records. And the storage receipt in his hand suggested that someone had kept them hidden all this time. Daniel took the storage receipt to an old records facility that afternoon. He almost turned back twice. For 20 years, he had believed the case was settled. Samuel had been fired, the company survived, and Daniel eventually built the successful business he had today. But now he couldn't stop thinking about one thing. What if he had ruined an innocent man's life? The receipt led Daniel to a storage box registered under the name of his former finance manager, Richard Cole. Richard had left the company years ago, but Daniel still remembered him clearly. He had been the man who first presented the evidence against Samuel. Daniel opened the box. Inside were old financial reports, company correspondence, and a handwritten note from Samuel. Daniel read it slowly. Samuel had discovered that money was being secretly moved from the company account into another account. He had tried to report it, but before he could, the records were changed to make it appear that he had authorized the transfers. Then Daniel found something even more disturbing. A copy of an email from Richard to someone outside the company. The date was 2 days before Samuel had been fired. Daniel's hands began to shake. Richard had known Samuel was innocent. He had deliberately created the false records. Daniel returned to his office and called Richard. Richard answered as if nothing had happened. But when Daniel mentioned Samuel's name, there was silence. Then Richard said, "Daniel, that was 20 years ago. Let it stay there." That answer told Daniel everything. He ended the call. Noah had been sitting quietly outside the office, waiting. When Daniel approached him, Noah stood immediately. "Did you find out what happened to my father?" Daniel looked at the boy. "Yes." Noah waited. Daniel took a breath. "Your father was telling the truth." Noah's eyes filled with tears. For years, he had carried the weight of wondering whether the world had simply forgotten his father. Now, for the first time, someone had finally believed him. But Daniel knew the truth alone wasn't enough. He had spent 20 years believing a lie. And now he had to decide what he was willing to do to make it right. Daniel could have kept the truth to himself. No one would have blamed him for leaving the past alone. Richard was gone, Samuel was dead, and the company Daniel had built was now worth millions. But every time Daniel looked at Noah, he remembered the young Samuel he had once sent away with a cardboard box. That evening, Daniel asked Noah to come into his office. "I owe your father an apology," he said. Noah looked at him. "You never even gave him a chance to prove himself." Daniel lowered his eyes. "You're right." Noah's voice trembled. "My father died believing everyone thought he was a thief." Daniel felt the words hit harder than any accusation. "I can't change what happened," he said. "But I can make sure the truth doesn't die with him." The following morning, Daniel reopened the old investigation. He contacted the former accountant who had handled the company's records and discovered one final piece of evidence, an archived backup showing that Richard had altered the original transactions. Daniel had everything he needed. But there was still one person who could explain why. Richard. Daniel called him again. This time, Richard agreed to meet. When they sat across from each other, Daniel placed the documents on the table. "You destroyed an innocent man's reputation," Daniel said. Richard stared at the papers. "I was protecting myself. You let Samuel take the blame." Richard finally admitted it. He had been stealing from the company and manipulated the records when he realized Samuel had discovered the transfers. Daniel sat silently. For 20 years, he had believed he had fired a thief. Now he understood that he had fired an innocent man because he was too afraid to question the evidence. Daniel stood. Samuel deserved better. Richard had no answer. And Daniel knew what he had to do next. He wasn't going to give Noah a handout and pretend that fixed everything. He was going to give his father something money could never buy. The truth. Daniel called a meeting with the people who had once worked closely with Samuel. He placed the original records on the table and explained what had really happened. Samuel had not stolen a single dollar. He had been framed. Daniel didn't hide his own mistake. "I believed the wrong evidence," he admitted. "And because of that, an innocent man lost his job and spent the rest of his life carrying a shame he never deserved." Noah sat quietly in the back of the room. Hearing those words made his chest tighten. For years, he had imagined his father standing alone, trying to convince people he wasn't a thief. Now, for the first time, someone was saying the truth out loud. After the meeting, Daniel turned toward Noah. "I know this doesn't give your father his life back." Noah wiped his eyes. "No, it doesn't." Daniel nodded. "But I can make sure his name is remembered for what he really was." Daniel officially cleared Samuel's name and arranged for the company's records to recognize that he had been wrongfully dismissed. Then he handed Noah a letter. It was written by Samuel years earlier. Noah opened it with trembling hands. His father had written that he never wanted Noah to spend his life believing that poverty made him less important than other people. He wanted his son to work hard, remain honest, and never allow another person's judgment to determine his worth. Noah couldn't hold back his tears. Daniel watched him silently. Then he said something Noah wasn't expecting. "I want to offer you a paid position in my company when you finish school. And I'll help you complete your education." Noah looked at him. "Why?" Daniel answered honestly. "Not because I feel sorry for you. Because your father taught me something I should have learned 20 years ago." Noah folded the letter carefully. For the first time since his father's death, he felt that something inside him had finally become lighter. But Daniel still had one final thing to do. He walked outside the building with Noah. The same place where the boy had spent several cold mornings sleeping against the wall. Daniel looked at him. "You don't have to sleep here anymore." Noah smiled. "I know." And for the first time, he walked away from the building without looking back. 6 months later, Noah stood in front of the same office building. But this time, he wasn't sleeping outside. He was wearing a clean shirt and carrying a school bag over his shoulder. He had returned for a different reason. Daniel saw him through the glass doors and smiled. "You're early," he said. Noah laughed. "I wanted to see the place again." Daniel walked outside with him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Noah looked at the wall where he had once slept. "I used to hate this place," he admitted. Daniel looked at him. "Why?" "Because I thought this was where my father lost everything." He paused. "Now I realize this is where I finally found the truth about him." Daniel nodded. "I wish I had listened to him 20 years ago." Noah looked at the man who had once fired his father. "My father would have forgiven you." Daniel looked surprised. "How do you know?" "Because he always told me that holding anger doesn't change the past." Noah reached into his bag and pulled out his father's old brown envelope. He had kept it. Not because he still needed it, but because it reminded him of how far he had come. Daniel smiled. "Are you still planning to work here after school?" Noah nodded. "One day, I want to build something of my own." Daniel smiled wider. "Then make sure you build it differently." Noah understood what he meant. He had learned that being poor was not a permanent identity, and being rich did not make someone incapable of making terrible mistakes. Sometimes, people don't need someone to rescue them. They need someone willing to listen, believe the truth, and give them a fair chance. Noah walked away from the building that morning with his father's letter safely in his bag. He had arrived there months earlier with nothing but an envelope and a promise. Now he had something much more valuable. A future. And behind him, Daniel stood watching, not because he had saved a poor boy, but because that poor boy had reminded a rich man of something he had forgotten. A person's worth is never measured by what they have in their pocket. And that was the lesson Noah's father had left behind. Thank you for watching this story. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications for more emotional, inspiring, and unforgettable stories like this. We'll see you in the next story.